Today we're going to be talking about this Murray Carter knife from Carter Cutlery. It's a small chef's knife. You can see the line beside it for scale. And I love this knife very much. It's crazy sharp and the handle is beautiful. Osage orange and maple, two of my favorite woods to work with. The difficulty I found is that this is very much a rocking knife. It has almost no flat spot at the heel and leaves all my vegetables accordioned. I want to reprofile this blade so that it has a flatter profile. It's just simply too small a knife to effectively rock chop many ingredients. So I'm going to see if I can make this work for me. Now this is a bit of a nervous endeavor because this is such a nice knife to begin with, but I really want it to work for me, and I think that it's part of the knife community to modify and make things work well for you. And this is a beautiful piece of steel to begin with, so I'm going to treat it with care. But at the end of the day, it is a tool and it does need to work the way that I need it to. So we're going to see if we can reprofile this blade. Now here we can see the profile that I'd eventually like to create. This is adapted from a Mac Gyuto knife, a profile that I like to use very much. And if this will focus, you can see how much steel we're going to remove. And this is what the final profile should look like, with a decided flat spot at the heel. Alright, I'm just about ready to get started. I have protected the handle with some cling film, put it in a vise with some protection, and we're just going to work slowly from the beginning, always working with our model, trying to not remove too much metal because the model is not perfect, and because throughout the process we're going to affect not only the grind of the knife but also the distal taper, and I want to leave some room at the end to do some refinement without ruining the profile that I've just made. Alright, so at this point I believe I've done most of the reprofiling work. You might be able to tell, but the blade is quite a lot flatter than it was before. It seems to have a good shape, it seems to flow on the board fairly well, and it seems to have a fairly flat heel. Now let's check it against our model. So I'm lining up the tip and the choil and the spine, and we can see that we're actually very close to that final goal. It's hard to see on the camera, but there's a little bit of steel left to work with. But that's just what I want. I don't want to go all the way down to the bone just yet, because as I feel it from the spine to the edge, I've now changed how the grind profile is set. And I can feel that it's very thin and lovely behind the edge right here, and about where I get to the Carter stamp I can feel it's decidedly thicker behind the edge, which means it may not go through product quite as well, and I will probably want to thin behind the edge right about here. And I have enough room on this part of the blade still to do that work so that I don't accidentally create sort of a concave divot here by overworking that part. So let's do the next step. protective tape to preserve the maker's mark, of course. I took quite a lot of belly out of the edge profile, and that resulted in thickness behind the primary edge. And the way that I've been able to feel that best is with sort of a thumbnail going down from the secondary bevel to the primary bevel. You can feel a bit of a shelf. I sharpen this up and cut with it. The primary edge is good, but it drags going through food, in part because it's rough, but in part because there's this shelf between the secondary and primary bevel. If I feel back on the very heel, which was basically untouched, it almost feels not quite like a zero grind, but there's very little shelf. But here, I can definitely feel it. So I'm going to work one side of the knife at a time, get it to a point where I feel that I like it, and then try to replicate that on the other side. Alright, it looks like we've done most of the work we need to here. Both sides have had the secondary bevel thinned out. Looking down the blade into the light, I've been able to see that I've got it relatively flat, relatively few waves. The edge is still nice and straight, and now I think I'm just going to start refining it, and whatever I get is what I get. Before I was working on an all dry 100 grit stone, it wore quite a lot while I was doing it, but it emphasized to me that you don't need an absolutely flat stone to do good work. You can see some obvious dishing on both the sides where I was working and the top. And when you're doing such coarse work, if you find a high spot, you can just work on top of it, and it really doesn't make too much of a difference in the end product. Let's try to get the light to pick up the scratch pattern. The scratches on this side of the knife are original from the 100 grit stone. They sort of go at two competing diagonals, creating a crosshatch. And then at the advice of other sharpeners and polishers, on the other side I've tried to go a different direction. All vertical. We've now got both sides of the knife done. See, the scratch pattern that was crosshatched before is now all going from spine to edge on both sides. I've also found that direct pressure over the spot of interest really gets the most work done. And you really don't get rewarded for timidity. You've really just got to go for it, move quickly, move decisively. Because the steel grinds so slowly, even the softer cladding, the material is very forgiving. Much more forgiving than wood, I've found. So don't be too afraid, just go for it. You can really see the unevenness in the surface of the steel come out as you proceed to now 1000 grit stone. Here's the side still at 220 grit. You can see it almost looks more even, more shiny, but you can still see a distinct difference between the Carter finish and mine. The other thing I'm finding is that building up a bit of mud really does help. I know there's a lot of uncertainty about what it does, but having that mobile, semi-liquid, semi-solid abrasive taste really does seem to speed the process along and maybe produce a bit more of an even polish because it spreads around a bit and helps create a little more homogenized effect overall. We can also compare now to the model and see that we've gotten very close. I really like the look of the new profile, and I can't imagine it looking any way else. Pretty good edge so far toward the heel. Looks like I need to refine the edge up here just a tiny bit, but looks like it's doing quite well. I will say that I really understand the sharpening cost for professionals who do this. This was quite a lot of work, quite a lot of hand labor, but it was a really fun thing to do. I think it paid off well. And like I said, I can't imagine this knife looking any other way now. And for those curious, the final edge, 1000 grit on a King Waterstone, followed by a leather strop with green compound. That's it. If I had to take any lessons away from this, it would be always start with a nice coarse stone. I found out that this steel is incredibly hard. I actually rounded the teeth of 2 files when I was originally trying to change the profile. I eventually settled on a 100 grit dry stone, basically for sharpening garden tools to do the coarse work. After that I moved to a 200 grit King Waterstone and then a 1000 grit King Waterstone. And those are the only real tools that I've used to do this. Those are the most effective options. I think that the choice to start with a model was key to the success. And I think that polishing the side of the blade, you know, doing that for enough time really paid off. Really making sure that the scratch pattern from the coarse grit was really polished away and invisible once you move on to the second grit. And that takes a little bit more time, but I'm very happy with the results overall. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this inspires some of you out there to go tinker with your own knives. And like I said earlier, the steel is actually relatively forgiving. It's so hard, it takes a lot of time to work, and if you're just using hand tools, I really think you can do a great job with it and not worry too much about making a terrible mistake. Stick to your pattern, work consistently, maintain your angles, and remember, wherever you're putting pressure down, that's where you're going to be doing the abrasion work between the stone and the knife. Good luck!